G'day everyone and welcome to what I can guarantee you will be a quick video from the Legal Studies guy on 3/1/12. Quick quote today from Lyndon B. Johnson, former American president, and he said, "Yesterday is not ours to recover, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose," aka don't dwell on what's come before. It's all about tomorrow and fresh start. So, particularly if you've had some sack results already, perhaps, maybe you've not had the best start of the year, maybe you're not happy with how your year 11 went, all those different things. Well, you can't recover it now. There's no point dwelling on it. It's all about tomorrow and doing your best to win from here on. What are we going to be able to answer today? Well, I'm hoping that by the end of this, you'll be able to answer what is a judge trying to achieve when they sentence an offender? So, what are the purposes of sanctions? So, once someone is convicted, because we're talking about an offender now, what are we trying to achieve when we give them a consequence? So, a sanction is effectively a consequence for their behaviour that they've been found guilty of committing or they've pled guilty to committing. Now, there are 5 things listed in the study design that we need to know, and I'll just show you them here. If I can get this to stay on the page. Rehabilitation, punishment, deterrence, general and specific denunciation and protection. And the reason those 5 things are listed as purposes of sanctions in the study design is because those 5 things are listed as purposes of sanctions in the Sentencing Act 1991, which is an act of Parliament. So it's a law made by Parliament that gives judges guidelines on how they should sentence people who have pled guilty or been found guilty of committing crimes. And it very clearly says in the Sentencing Act that every time a judge gives a sanction to someone, so a consequence, and we'll learn more about which sanctions a judge can give in our next video, namely imprisonment, fines, and community corrections orders. Every time a judge gives a sanction, they must explain what purpose they are trying to achieve. So there has to be a reason for giving the sanction. There has to be some kind of rationale behind it. And the Sentencing Act says there are 5 rationales that a judge can use. A judge must use at least one, but they can use more than one. And they're pretty clear things. So the first one is simply to punish an offender. So give the offender a just punishment in response to the act that they committed. And the key thing there is the word just. So it has to be commensurate. It has to be measurable in relation to the act that they committed. And good, clear examples are you murder someone, you will lose your liberty and freedom and be put in prison, as opposed to a driving offence where you might just have to pay some money, but you still keep your freedom. So the level of punishment will depend on the crime that you've committed and been convicted of. So a judge can give you a sanction to punish you. A judge can give you a sanction to try and deter other people from committing offences. So, deterrence is, well, there's 2 aspects to deterrence that we'll learn about. It's deterring other people from committing offences. Hey, I saw that when this person sped, they got a fine, so I'm not going to speed. But it's also about deterring you. And that's where this language of general and specific deterrence come in. And it's important that you understand the difference between those 2 things. So general deterrence is effectively deterring others. So others see what happened to you and don't want the same thing to happen to them. That's one of the purposes of sanctions. And then specific deterrence, which is deterring you. You did this, had to pay money, therefore you don't want to do it again. So that's a reason why a judge might particularly give you a fine, but also imprisonment. You went to prison last time, you don't want to go to prison again. So deterrence is one of the purposes. Really, really important one is this concept of rehabilitation. So establishing conditions where we are trying to rehabilitate the person. So we're trying to hopefully educate them, support them with some of the factors that have caused them to commit criminal max. Not necessarily a huge function of things like imprisonment and fines, but definitely community corrections orders that we'll learn about. So a judge can give you a sentence to try and more or less hopefully fix you so that you don't commit crimes in the future. One that's a little bit harder to understand is this concept of denunciation. So this is just the idea that by giving you a sanction, it sends a public message that the behavior was wrong. So really important is this idea that the court sends a public message. That's the concept of denunciation, clearly showing the community that this behavior is wrong. And then finally, a judge can give a sanction for the purpose of protecting the community from you. And realistically, protecting the community from you is really likely to occur through jail. So that's where this sanction of imprisonment, removing someone from society, is really aiming to protect the rest of the community from that person because they can't harm you if they're locked away. These are the 5 purposes, as I said, and anytime a judge gives you a sanction, the judge has to reference one of these and can reference more than one. And you'll see these words used in sentencing reports when you read them. And I've got a link for you to find those later on. Our skill here is that we need to discuss. So we know, again, a discuss is an exchange of opinions, so looking at 2 different sides. Discuss the ability of sanctions to achieve their purposes. So how good are sanctions like imprisonment, fines, and community corrections orders at actually protecting or punishing or deterring? And this is the sort of question you might get. Discuss the ability of imprisonment to meet the purposes of sanctions. So discuss exchange of opinions. Can imprisonment protect the community? But also maybe how does it not protect the community? Does prison rehabilitate people or maybe does it not? So looking at both sides of that, and we're going to look at a sample answer to this question once we learn about, so in the next video, once we learn about the different types of sanction. We don't have to do principles of justice because this is a separate section of the study design now. So we don't need to apply sentencing to fairness, equality, and access, which just leaves us with our usual synthesis skill. It's a mouthful. About applying legal principles and information to actual or hypothetical scenarios. And I will link below a link to Ostley, and particularly Ostley's County Court page, where you can actually open up and read a bunch of sentencing reports from judges. Really clearly, if you go to that link, you're generally looking for any case that is listed as DPPV. And I'll also link you to the Sentencing Advisory Council as they talk about how sentencing works. Moral of the story, hopefully, apart from the crazy dog you can hear in the background, hopefully you know what a judge is trying to achieve when they sentence an offender, and you can answer any questions you get on that.